Hello, Soul Recovery community. It's Rev Rachel, and I just wanted to give you a little update on what's happening in September. For those of you that join us once a month for the free, open, and available to everyone Soul Recovery support group that is normally on the first Monday of every month, a reminder that because of Labor Day, we will be doing that on the second Monday, which is the 9th of September. If you've already registered in the past, be on the lookout for an email closer to that date that will have the link as a reminder. And if you haven't registered yet, hop on the website, recoveryoursoul.net. Everyone is free and welcome to attend. Also in September, I'm having my in-person soul recovery retreat in Colorado. I'm so excited. It's going to be September 14th and 15th. And this is going to be a transformational weekend where we are really taking that deep dive into what do we do now with our soul recovery to truly step into our authentic self. So if you've had a little part of you that's wondering, should I go to Colorado and be with Rev Rachel? The answer is a definite yes. Go check out the website and get more information on that. And I just want to say thank you for being part of the soul recovery community. Together, we can do the work that will recover your soul. They say that relationships can be our greatest teachers, and I think that's true. But it is our romantic relationships that really have the most opportunity for growth because they're where we're at every single day. If you listen to the podcast and you heard the episode a few weeks back, you'll know that Rich and I, my husband, we had a moment where I started to wonder if this relationship was for me. Not that anything horrendous was happening, but it just was getting flat and it didn't feel like we were both on the trajectory to move forward in our soul recovery. And although I'm here telling you all of this soul recovery information and you're listening to the process and you're interested in the tools, it is very different in your own home of how you interact with the people that you love and that you're in relationship with without fixing them. And so it's this dance of how do you show up as your higher self in your relationship and not be trying to change or fix anyone and be willing to ask for what you need. But the beauty was that we ended up having a very heartfelt and connecting conversation where I had an ask and I said, I need us to have more intimacy. I need us both to be growing, and I need you to do some work of your own deciding to be able to get to a place where you're letting go of those old patterns and beliefs too. And I'm so grateful that he said yes, that he said, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And this conversation with my husband and I, you'll hear two people that love each other very much. And you're going to hear his perception of that event and where he's going with it. What is he doing with this ask that I have that is around us building and growing our relationship together? Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Recover Your Soul podcast, a spiritual path to a happy and healthy life. My name is Reverend Rachel Harrison. I started Recover Your Soul after having profound changes in my life from my recovery of alcoholism, codependency, and control addiction. I was guided to share the tools and principles of spirituality and soul recovery to help others transform their lives as mine was transformed. For us to overcome external circumstances, we need to turn the attention to ourselves, focusing on our inner change and healing. Positive results in our lives will follow. Welcome to Recover Your Soul. I'm Rev Rachel, and I am back with a special guest today, my husband, Rich.
Hello.
Hello. So I wanted to bring him on the podcast because if you listened to the episode in the last 3 weeks or so, he and I had an awakening of awareness in our marriage that potentially meant that I might make a decision to leave. I'm grateful that I didn't. And I'm grateful that he came with an open heart to be open to hearing what I had to say and curious about doing his own soul recovery journey a little bit deeper. So I wanted to bring him on to share his own perspectives around that event, how he's doing on his own journey of his own life, not of my wanting him to do anything, but in his own words, and to really reflect on us as a couple for others to use as inspiration.
Okay, my turn.
That was quite the interesting long lead in, wasn't it?
That's all right.
All right.
Well, I would say that I got caught off guard and with a bit of surprise when Rachel approached me, basically saying, our marriage is too sleepy and tired, and I'd like more connection. And I was sitting in the chair that she took me out and to the American Furniture Warehouse and bought me special. And I kind of looked down and I was like, well, yeah, okay.
In your recliner, you're saying?
I am sitting here in my recliner. But I could understand where Rachel was coming from pretty quickly. Although at first it was like being hit with the bear mace or the stun gun. And it's difficult that way. I think if I can say it to the audience that, well, it was said by you that you let things stack up and we struggle to, or we could do a better job of having a schedule of checking in together and really, really communicating. And we had gotten laxed with that. I will say that the Soul Recovery Network that you have created over the past 2 years has been fantastic for me. I think that Rachel has caught up to a way of sort of living and working that I've had most of my life, not caught up, but found her own. Just such a deep groove that you enjoy so much that you're out here working just all the time, lots and lots and lots. And I think it's wonderful. But I think that also had pulled us apart a little bit. We're just kind of tend to get in our own tracks and in our own lanes for a while. And then we realize we need more connection.
Are you ready to step into your soul recovery? Well, I am here to support you as your spiritual coach. Visit the website to book one-on-one coaching sessions with me as we transform your life through working the 9 steps of soul recovery. You can also choose to work the steps on your own through the modules at your own pace. I'm excited to also be announcing that there are retreats every year, both in Colorado and other places in the country, workshops and events, and I hope that you also will join us the first Monday of every month from 6 to 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time for the free Zoom support group. This is an amazing place for us to connect, learn, and share our stories. And don't forget to join the private Facebook group for soul recovery, inspiration, connection, answering each other's questions, and giving shout outs. I thank you for supporting this podcast either by being a Patreon member, Apple Podcast subscriber, and getting that extra episode every Friday, or by your one-time donations or your small monthly donations that are found in the show notes. You are helping spread the soul recovery message and supporting this community. Visit the website recoveryoursoul.net for dates, times, everything that's happening, register for the support group, and how to stay connected. Together, we can do the work that will recover your soul. Yeah, and I think it's interesting because if I'm really looking at myself, there's also a piece where workaholism can be a place where if you're not feeling content, it's easy to put yourself into something else, right? So
totally.
If you're not feeling content in what's happening in your marriage, then you find another place to find that level of contentment. And you know what's interesting? What I said in the podcast where I talked about this whole situation that happened with us is that we went on our trip to Indonesia and had such a marvelous time together. And we're so connected that when we came back into life again, I think I had this, it's almost like a depression or a withdrawal of how we both showed up on that trip in our fullest self. And then we kind of went back into life. And I missed that part of how you were showing up for me there. And that is something that now that I see it, I want more of that. I want more of what you brought in on that trip in terms of connection and awareness of yourself and lightheartedness. And I recognize that we both fall into our patterns, workaholism or checkoutness, that I'm asking us to step forward and be more awake on a regular basis and not slip so quickly and easily.
Agreed. This event that we had really brought that to light for me too. And I had lost a job that was going to be really great to just be able to work right up to the last minute before we went to Indonesia. And so I remodeled our bathroom instead.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about stun gun. It stunned me how many challenges I ran into because I've been at it for a long time. Pretty good at what I do, especially in remodel. And our bathroom was a great challenge. But anyways, coming back from the trip, which we had saved for, and it was okay that we made it through the trip for me in my mind, but I was really nervous coming home to get the income and the flow of my business rolling again. And so I went straight into it and probably robotically went into it. And then the other thing I want to point out is this episode made me reflect way, way, way back through the drinking, almost to the beginning of where we really struggled to be on the same page at times and raise the kids. My go-to, I'm realizing through all of this that my go-to mechanism is I can just withdraw and go build something. It's really a tool that I've developed through our relationship, and it's a form of withdrawing. And I was working with somebody the other day who said, look at it like a tennis court or a pickleball court or a ping pong table. You don't want to be in attack mode, going over the net in a relationship, but you also don't want to pull back so far that you're outside the court. You get to that back line and, at least stay in the court, meaning don't check out so far that we're just not living our relationship together and our lives together. And, there's times when, when it's hard and I just need some time, I need to reset and come back, but, not go off the court. And really my refuge has been being a creative person, being a craftsman. And that's always there for me to go do something creative.
And that's interesting because on one level, our house, for those of you who have come to retreats or our friends, you've seen our house, which every square inch is a creation. And it's this double-edged sword that we're always flipping the coins around about whether we're showing up and doing something out of our healthy self or whether we're doing something out of our shadow self, and to love and accept all of it. Because on some level, we have this incredibly creative house that you've created. And on the other level, a lot of it has been this, well, I don't know what else to do here or how to feel here, so I'm just going to do this thing that I know how to do.
Yeah. It's really true.
So one of the things that was my request in our conversation was that you hadn't ever completed the 12 steps or done therapy aside from the therapy that we did together, where I just spent the whole hour complaining about you and we never had any movement. So I requested that you do work if we're going to step into this new relationship together. And you had some resistance on doing that. Can you share what that resistance was?
I guess my first reaction was, we've come all this way together. We're 32 years together. We've done so much together. We've been through so much together. How can this happen? And the quickness of it is hard. I mean, if I could feel it building up, it'd be a little different too, because, a couple, 2-3 weeks earlier, we both expressed that, hey, isn't this great? Life is great, but that's how life goes. It ebbs and flows, and sometimes steeply.
You said that you didn't really want to dig in, that you said you had resistance to doing the therapy, to going back and looking at the things that I was asking you to look at. And I think it's just helpful for our listeners to understand, maybe their spouses, where we're saying this stuff in your subconscious is creating patterns that are not benefiting us. And the response for you was, I don't really want to go back and look at it.
Well, not literally that I don't want to. I'm always willing. I think it's complicated. I think that I'm mostly an optimist that just wants to move forward and, go back and find my core wounds or my traumas and work with those. It sounds like a lot of work. It sounds like a lot of pain. And just on the surface, it's like, I don't know if I want to do that. However, there's a strong side of me that from what I've been learning just recently and from, already going to 2 meetings with a fantastic therapist. He tells me that when we're young, we develop coping mechanisms and tools to simply make it through the world and make it make enough sense that we can survive in the world. And my past, and I've told you this, Rachel, is pretty sordid. It's a pretty chaotic situation. My mom and dad breaking up when I'm 4 years old, and lots of yelling and chaos. But I don't remember it literally, but I'm 99% sure that I certainly got affected and through that in a negative way. I can imagine. And then there's a period of time where my dad's not there. I don't have a standard set of parents, and I got super connected to my mom and mama's boy and a lot of fear. I was telling my therapist, memories of my mom would drop me off at the church for after school programs, and I could barely handle it. I would sneak out of the classroom and be wandering through the halls of the church, crying hard, just freaking out because I wanted to be at home. I could tolerate school, but anything after that, I wanted to be at home with my mom,
Mm-hmm.
and there's got to be something to that. And then my stepdad comes along, who's wonderful. But by this time, my dad's an alcoholic. My mother's an alcoholic. My stepdad's an alcoholic. My mom wants to overlook her alcoholism and put the spotlight on Jono, my stepdad, and his alcoholism. And he buys us a big new house. And in that house, he gets relegated to the maid's room because they're screaming and yelling at each other all the time. And I remember it being it's like a happy, very happy part of my life. I think my mom was just a really good mom to sort of divert the attention, and she just created a fabulous life for my brother and I. But there's all this stuff still going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I, to this day, don't fully understand it. And that's why I took your cue, and I'm like, yeah, I'll go. I'll go. I want to figure out what this shadow past, or this, whatever, where my hole is, and I'm not nearly as close to my real father. I'd like to be miles away from even getting even a little under the surface with him in a conversation. My mom and John are both gone at this point, and all these things just add up. And my brother had some serious up and down crazy events, and is still an alcoholic. And one thing that the therapist told me is, when you're a little kid, you don't know the difference, but he would reach out with his hand like he was trying to grab smoke. And he was like, when you're in an alcoholic environment, it's real, and there's just this tiny thing missing, and you don't realize it at the time. And that's where I do want to dig in
Mm-hmm.
and figure this out, for myself. That being said, I'm going to try to dig in there. Yes. We talked about the resistance. Well, I'm already over that because I'm a pretty willing guy. And especially when my wife comes to me and says, I'm unhappy again. and I opened the door for you, and you were like, oh, okay. And you're about to walk out the back door again. I was immediately willing to do whatever it took.
I love that you are doing all those things. And I love these awarenesses. And thank you for sharing about your experience as a child, because I think that is very connecting for people who had alcoholic homes and divorced homes, to recognize patterns and stories that feel similar to that, and a willingness to really look into how those things have affected your subconscious. And what he says about what we develop as children and the patterns and beliefs that we create for survival is exactly what I teach in soul recovery. So I love that you're getting that. And from the perspective of sort of bouncing around in this conversation a little bit, to have the part where, as your partner, I don't always do the best job of letting you know when the Jenga pieces are stacking, that they're stacking. And the truth is, I don't even know that they're stacking. Sometimes it's happening so subtly that it isn't until it's sort of a wobbling tower that I even recognize it's a wobbling tower. But as a partner that is learning how to have a voice, and you've been with me for 32 years, so sometimes how hard it's been for me to have a voice. What is successful in that? What could have I done differently? How is it in relationship that we've had for this desire for growth? What was your interpretation of me in that moment?
I think the best way to respond to that question is to not try to be an expert myself, but tell you how that came up in my therapy session just 2 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
I told my therapist that I've always found you to be pretty extreme in the retreating and the bottling up and building. What I coined when we had this argument was, it's like a Jenga game, because you said it stacks up, and I was like little Jenga pieces until the tower's super tall, and then wham, it falls over. And I told him that I've on the positive side, over all of our years, I've wanted you to come out and yell if you had to, say what you needed. We've been through it quite a bit, and it's hard. It's hard for you to do that. I was talking about how you would say that you don't have a voice, and that I get too logical when we argue, and it just kind of shuts you down.
Mm-hmm.
Through this conversation with him, I told him, I said, I want her to come out. I mean, I want her to yell if she has to. The only problem is the Jenga scenario, where it builds up for too long, and then it goes from everything's okay to everything's absolutely not okay. Mm-hmm. That's the hard part. If we were more skilled, we're learning the skills. We're gaining the skills. The truth is, we're learning them at this point that we didn't have. And you can learn a skill, but if you don't practice it, that's the thing.
Right.
Is we get, I'll speak for myself. I'm sounding all codependent here. I am addicted to work and the survival of work. And that came out of how you and I raised kids when we didn't have any money. But you rise to the occasion, you grow up fast, and I work a lot so that I can feel a sense of security and come to this home. And by the way, reflecting back to the creative, being a craftsman and building this beautiful home, that's my reward after all these years, is to want to come home. And when I walk through the door, I'm happy. I look around and I'm happy, but I'm kind of addicted to that survival instinct of working. And so you work all day. Now I come home and I sit in my lazy boy and I get lazy. I need to practice being a really great husband to you and an excellent communicator to you from my side of the court, so I can, as much as I put into my creativity of building some beautiful thing, I need to build that beautiful thing with you.
Thank you. And what I think is interesting is alcohol is the checkout, and then we can not even notice the subtlety of sitting in the lazy boy and turning on the TV. That's also equally a checkout. That's
just become what my alcoholism is. I mean, that's the bummer is I've been reflecting. I already did reflect back on my parents. And by the way, I called my mom an alcoholic, my dad, my stepdad, my brother, and me. I don't think I even said that. I'm an alcoholic. Luckily, I was dabbling over the past couple of years, and I'm even done with that. I have no desire to even take a sip of anything. And unfortunately, on the plus side, I love my downtime. I think we all need to work hard and then solid rest. I love it now, but I just can't let that get away from me. And check out the same way I used to check out with a drink in my hand. I just have homemade Rachel kombucha in my hand instead.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful to recognize, and also to recognize the value of rest, So now that you've stepped into therapy, which thank you, by the way, for being willing to do that, what is the awarenesses that you've had in these first couple sessions? I also thank you for feeling like our conversation was a wake-up call that you were interested in stepping into. What have you learned about yourself so far?
I don't want to toot my horn, but I was really grateful that when you approached me, and I was stunned at first, I pretty quickly I looked at you, and through the fear and the trapdoor just dropping my heart to the floor, I said, if you recall. I love you and I appreciate you, and I'll do whatever you ask of me. And what's interesting about that is I said that, but it still got hard and harder. And we talked for hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours. And what's cool is that when I got to therapy, he was basically telling me to do just that. And I was like, well, that's cool, because just by chance, I sort of did the right thing. And by doing the right thing, you had a positive response, and we were able to talk through it. On the other hand, what I'm learning about myself is it's kind of familiar territory. It's what you've referred to a lot throughout our lives together. Just that to just be present, to, instead of being right, just look for connection. That's one thing that he told me about.
Do you want to be right or do you want to be connected? Yeah. I love that, because there's actually used to be, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And I actually think connection is more genuine of what it is that we're looking for.
Well, and that's what I'm basically stealing my notes from Wednesday. At one point in the conversation, I was explaining how you were raised with two parents who were super into their own lives. And some of your tools that you learned were, you're going to have
coping skills.
Thank you. Is that, you weren't important, and you had to be good, right? Mm-hmm. That came out. You had to be good and you had to just tag along.
And what did you learn about you?
So you were raised by a single mom, and it was like being raised in the Buddhist temple. You guys barely yelled, barely ever had an argument, right? And then I'm raised in all this chaos, which I was young enough to be slightly shielded from, but I'm curious about the effects of that. And I mentioned to my therapist that, so her bar is kind of low. I'm like, yeah, her bar is really low. and I explained to him that Alex is my brother, the second version of my brother, and Bodhi's the second version of me, and all that chaos, I was pretty used to it, and you weren't, and this sort of thing. And so my experience is I'm pretty freaking mellow compared to what experienced. And he goes, you know what he did? He actually got personal and told me about him. He's like, my grandfather threw my grandmother across the room. And then my dad would drink and take care of our basics. But do you think I could have a conversation with him? And I was like, totally relating, because it's kind of a little bit like mine. And he's like, my dad was so much better than his dad that was the new norm. Mm-hmm. And he told me, he's like, yeah, you might think you're good, but you got to get good enough for Rachel. Mm. And that really hits me right now, because he's like, you've made a ton of progress. There's always more progress to be made. And he took his finger and he did like a vertical spiral that we must continue to get better and better, just as humans, in our relationships, in our marriage. And I loved that, because then I can't just sit on my laurels and say, but I'm so much better than my dad or my brother, and you're telling me, will you come a little closer and get a little better? And I'm like, willing.
I appreciate that so much, because that was my whole ask, is I don't want you to not be you. I don't want you to become codependent and become who you think I want you to be. I want you to be the best version of you, the most healed, awake, vibrant version of you that has healing from all these pieces of subconscious, and that we all have, that revert back to unhealthy patterns or coping mechanisms that can be destructive. So I appreciate this awareness of the spiral of growth, which is always the moving forward. And it needs to be mostly for ourselves and always in union of the people around us, recognizing that the healthier we are with ourselves, the more we benefit those in our lives.
And another way to look at it, which he explained, was the reason it was a circle is that, you come around, after a year, after 5 years, and he said, you kind of need to look at your relationship, because it does become outdated. People change, hopefully evolve, like you, get healthier, way more aware, way more conscious. And if I'm not keeping up, if one person's not keeping up, then it's become outdated and you revisit it. And that's why he is doing the circle with his finger. But let's get more and more connected, more and more conscious as we go up, instead of just staying on a flat plane. So I look back on my life and I'm really, really happy with all the things I attempted and have done, and all the creative process involved in all of it. And I realized I had been pushing so hard, like I mentioned earlier, about being kind of addicted to survival through my work, through the creative process. It got to this point where I wanted to tell myself and feel and contentedly feel what is enough in my world and in my life. And it actually was a really, really great thing. However, it's also a plateau, right?
Right.
It also has this potential to say, I'm good right here. And I'm going to stop maybe paying attention to that upward spiral.
Yeah, that's really well said.
Just made me emotional again.
That's really well said.
So my favorite word in all of life, every time I have trouble, my logical brain goes, oh, balance, capital B. Life is all about balance. And maybe it is in this case. It's a balance of, I really enjoy what I have, who I am, who I'm married to, big time, crazy about Rachel. And I want that enoughness for me to bring me joy and not be needing, grasping, not be grasping. At the same time, I think I mentioned that what's left for me is deeper spiritual experience. And so I need that spiral to keep going up, but I also want that to be within the sphere of what's enough for me.
Yeah.
That I'm content and I'm happy.
Yeah. I love that. That's a perfect way to end. Thank you so much for being on and sharing your heart with us. And I love you so much.
I love you too.
Until next time, namaste. Thank you for listening, and I hope that helps support your soul recovery process. I just wanted to give you a quick reminder that every Friday is the Recover Your Soul bonus podcast, and this is available both to Apple Podcast subscribers for $3.99 a month, or it's available for both free and paid Patreon members. So as a Patreon member, you can choose, do you want to support the podcast with $5, $10, or $25 a month? Totally volunteer, but to let you know that if you want to listen to those bonus episodes, incredible interviews, wonderful book studies, you don't have to be a paid member. You can access them in the first week or two that they're available free on Patreon. This community is so important to me, and I want you to know I treat it with love and consideration. If you want coaching, I'm here for you. You want to come to a retreat, I'm here for you. You want to come to the free soul recovery support group, the community is here for you. Watch us on Facebook, Instagram, follow us on all the social media for daily inspiration. Be part of the Facebook group. And one of the most important things is that you share this podcast with people that you think that it will resonate with, that you think that they're interested. Give it 5 stars, give it a review. We are growing this community together because together we can do the work that will recover your soul. The Recover Your Soul podcast and its content is for educational purposes only and is not allied or representative of any organizations or religions. It's based on the opinions and experience of Rev Rachel Harrison. Recover Your Soul claims no responsibility to any persons or entity for any liability, loss, damage, or cause alleged to be caused directly or indirectly as a result of its use. Applications or interpretations of the information represented herein. Take what you need and leave the rest.